Hey, tennis fans, you are listening to Match Point Canada, the official podcast of Tennis Canada. We are also members of the Tennis Channel Podcast Network. I'm Ben Lewis, joined alongside Mike McIntyre. And Mike, we have another special guest this week.
Our guest this week is a former top 20 player on the WTA, a semifinalist at Wimbledon in 1999, and now a very recognizable face for her terrific work with ESPN. She hosts her own tennis podcast. She's working on a book. She coaches kids tennis. She does a little bit of everything. I don't know where she finds the time to talk to us, but Alexandra Stevenson, it's our pleasure to welcome you to Matchpoint Canada. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me, guys, and thank you for staying up late.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you're worth staying up for, and it's great to chat with you. We most recently saw you, of course, covering the U.S. Open. So I just want to start there. Maybe what was the experience like at Flushing Meadows this summer, and was it maybe especially cool seeing a young American in Coco Gauff break through and win her maiden Grand Slam title?
It was very exciting. Look, from the beginning, ESPN has been covering qualifying for the last couple years, which I think is great for tennis in general to bring more people to the sport. And the USTA brings in its free tickets for the whole week. So they had like 70,000 people come in through that whole week for free, which was extraordinary. And from the beginning, we saw Coco's summer, how she
Mhm.
started at Wimbledon with a big fail to Sophia Kenin, who also is a Grand Slam champion, but she should have won that match if she had played right. And she just really went back to work, and we saw her start winning tournaments. And then all of a sudden, Brad Gilbert popped into her camp. And from then on, I knew that she was going to have a big summer. I didn't really know she was going to win the tournament, meaning the US Open. But I
Mhm.
felt like as soon as Brad Gilbert came in, because Brad had been talking about Coco the last couple years around me, and he knew what she needed to do. And it was very interesting that it was so simple, but nobody had really maybe explained it to her. And I know Parariba had come in as a new coach, and she kind of just had a refresh, reset button. And look, the women's game today is about movement and defense and then a little bit of offense. I mean, we saw Sabalenka win Australia and she is one in the world, but that's she's different than the rest of the field. You look at the top 100, it's a lot of movement and defending and not a lot of power like how when I came up in the 2000s. And so I knew Coco could have a way through if she had a good draw. She could make it through the semifinals, and then everybody saw her draw and was like, "Oh, Swiatek." But look, Iga wasn't really on point the whole summer,
Didn't
and
didn't even get to that match.
no, she didn't even get to the match because Ostapenko took her out. So it was just kind of exciting that we had from qualifying day one started talking about Coco and the build up, and she actually was able to follow through and then win her first Grand Slam.
Yeah, her defensive movement is outstanding. We saw her here in Toronto last year, and we're just blown away by the talent that she has. So you get the right voices in your corner as well, and that was maybe just the missing link there because that summer between DC,
Mm-hmm.
between Cincinnati, and just kept getting one up, one up, one up, and then her first
Yeah.
Grand Slam title. You had a pretty busy and successful summer as well, and I want to talk a bit about what you're up to these days before we dive deep into the tennis here. I mean, obviously, we're very familiar with your tennis career. Your work with ESPN has been terrific, top notch, and you were so prominent this year in all the
Thank
coverage
you.
each day. We saw you speaking with Canadian journalist Mark Rowe a few times on TSN. So you got your,
Mark and I are buddies.
Oh, nice.
He calls
yeah.
me Canada's favorite commentator.
Well,
I
see,
love
that's
that.
how I'll introduce you next time. Great. Um, but I wasn't aware so much about your podcast, Serving Aces. You mentioned before we hit record about a book you're working on. Why don't you bring our listeners a little bit up to speed about what you're up to these days, aside from the things that you're most well known for, I suppose.
Oh, thanks. Well, I decided a couple months ago just to try a podcast, and I started it out with my friend Sam Gore, who's a ESPN host, and he does volleyball. He does all sports, volleyball, basketball, college sports, tennis, and it was going to be fun with Sam, but then he had to drop out because he's just so busy with ESPN, which is great. And I found my old coach, Hugues Lavadier from Quebec City, from Levy, I have to say it right. And I called him up. I'm like, hey, do you want to be a guest on my podcast? And he's like, sure. And so I really just kind of started it, didn't really know what I was doing, and kind of fell into a rhythm with Oogie. And now we're 14 episodes in, and it's been a lot of fun. And I think it helped me with my analyzation, just following the year of tennis and then adding in other sports to it and comparing other sports with tennis. And I like that I can bring pop culture, and I can kind of just write my own production notes and think of ideas each week. I did have a bit of a hiatus this summer because I was with ESPN for Wimbledon and US Open, and I couldn't do my podcast then. But now I'm back, and Oogie and I are trying to build something.
Oh,
Awesome.
that's
Well,
that's really, really cool.
welcome to the world of tennis
Thank you.
podcasting.
Well,
We
I'll
always
have to
say
have you guys on.
the more the
Oh, yeah,
merrier, and with
we'd
your
appreciate
Montreal
that.
connection, it's only natural that we, also we'd love to. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
that'd be fun.
Yeah, for sure. I want to ask you, I mean, I'm always very interested in sort of that moment when a professional player is deciding to step away from the game
Hmm.
and they're, pondering their life. What is next? How difficult was that sort of transition for you? And now clearly your days are so busy. And at the same time, maybe, seeing a player like Caroline Wozniacki return this
Hmm.
summer. When did you maybe have that clarity that like, I'm content with what I've done professionally in this sport.
Yeah.
Now I would like to explore other avenues.
Well, that's a great question because I've never had that clarity and I'm not
Okay.
content.
Yeah. Okay.
And I'm being honest. Look,
Yeah.
I got hurt with my shoulder, and I felt like I was about to break in. I was 18 in the world, and I was really finding my game and finding I was beating like from 1 to 10, and I'd beaten Capriati 3 times in a row, and she was ranked 1. And I finally kind of found the rhythm. It took me 4 years to figure it out, and I was finding my game, and then I hurt my shoulder, and then I got surgery, and then I fought my way back to like 200, and I just really didn't have the backing of a team and the building that you need. And it's interesting when you're American, it's like it's different than if you're European or maybe even Canadian. I know couple of the girls would argue with me on that, but uh, it's just harder because you have to do it yourself and you don't really have the extra help. And once my shoulder got hurt, I lost everybody kind of in my tennis life. They kind of just walked away. They didn't want to help me out. And that was difficult. And then, but I'm a fighter and I didn't want to give up. So it took me a long time to get my shoulder back. It was a lot of losses. And you can look back like maybe I should have just waited. But if I hadn't have gone out there and competed and gotten my motion, I would have had a stiff shoulder and it would have never been the same. A lot of players had tried to come back from the surgery I had and couldn't. And then I got to a point where I was like going to get set up. I had found a sponsor and I was going to try. And then COVID happened. And I was like, I'm 37, I think, or 36, 37, maybe 37 or 38. I kind of stopped counting my age.
That's
Same
fair.
here. Same here.
Yeah, yeah. You guys know. So um, then it kind of just like, it was like, okay, what do I do? And I had the summer before it was difficult because I knew I had to build a team, but I didn't have the finances. And that's something people don't realize is you have to have the finances. So Caroline Wozniacki coming back, it's a different situation. She was one in the world. She has
Mhm.
unlimited wild cards and she has millions of dollars. So she has the finances to do that. Venus has the finances to keep playing.
Yeah.
I did not because when I got hurt, it was at when I was going to get to break in to making more money, but the money in the 2000s was not like it is now. So it's totally different. And that's why I didn't really have clarity about that I've had a great career because I felt like yeah, I had look, if I look at what I've done a lot in a short time in my career. And I graduated from college while I was on tour. And now I'm in the second career. So it's all good. It's just really hard as an athlete, going back to the what you asked me, to walk away and not be able to finish the way I want to. And that's what I struggle with. It's tough. So it's tough, like going into broadcasting with ESPN and then watching all these girls play, and like you going, okay, well, if I could train for 6 months, like I could, I can still serve 125. Uh, and I have a different kind of game. I could slice, come into the net. Like you think that. So I can see why Caroline came back, because she was
Mhm.
in the broadcast booth seeing what the tennis was out there. And it's just a different game right now on the women's side than it was when Caroline played and when I played. And there's a lot of opportunity to move up quicker if you have the right backing. So that's the trick. You have to have the right backing and you have to have the right team, and then it's a little easier to move forward, especially if you have unlimited wild cards.
I'm always fascinated by the mind of an athlete, and it's really cool to hear that you still clearly have like that competitive fire. Are
Yeah,
you in
that
that?
hasn't gone out. Look,
I can
hey, I
tell.
went surfing last week, and I have to
Yeah,
say, I hired a surf coach because I hadn't done it in like 15
yeah.
years. And I was like, I'm just gonna go because I'm like right by the water, and it's ridiculous that I never go. So he
Mhm.
was very cute, I have to say.
Little extra
But
I love it.
motivation.
he's like
Yeah.
18 years younger than me. But hey,
Well, that's fine.
Madonna dates people 18 years younger, right? So, but I was so competitive because he's like,
Mm.
"Oh, it'll take a while." I'm like, "No, I used to surf all the time. Like I grew up surfing." And I'm like, "I'm going to get it. You watch. In like 4, I'm going to get up and I'll be up for the whole hour." Because I booked an hour. He's like, "Are you sure you don't want to do 30 minutes?" I'm like, "No, I'm doing an hour." So I got up. It took me 3 tries. I ate it
Nice.
the first 2. The
Mhm.
third try I got up, and then I did the whole hour. I was up every time, and then we did 2 drop-in waves because I was just doing the white water because it was like my first time in a while. And then he's like, "Oh, let's try some drop-ins." And I was like, "Okay." And so he set me up and then I just went. But yes, an athlete is always competitive even in Monopoly.
Wow. Wow. Have you always, do you think, had that competitive spirit about you from a very young age? And I also wanted to ask you because
Mhm.
for those who don't know, it's a very interesting story actually, that your father is Dr. J, Julius Erving, I mean one of the greatest NBA players of all time, and you had a very fascinating story actually. First meeting him for the first time, I think back in 2008. I
Mhm.
wonder if he
You
passed on
did your
some of that
research.
oh, a little bit. I wonder if he passed off some of that competitive edge as you know an all-star phenomenal athlete as well.
Well, I think, look, how I was raised to be an athlete. Um, but I was in the pool at 6 weeks. My mom felt swimming was really good for babies right away and their lungs and the development. And she was a sports writer, so she wanted me to be in like something athletic because I would get a full college scholarship. That was how she was going to get me through college. And obviously, with who my father is, and then she knew I'd be athletic. But it doesn't always mean like just because you have a professional athlete,
Mhm.
one parent, doesn't mean you're athletic. But my mom was athletic, and then I came out and she said, "Oh, this is an athlete." Like I guess I was lean and mean when I was a baby. But at 6 months, you could toss me in the deep end and I could just do somersaults in the pool. And then growing up, I loved gymnastics. So I'd always be doing cartwheels and I was just very active. And surprisingly, I didn't talk till I was 3, which is funny now because I like to talk. But I was always doing athletic stuff up until then. And then I got introduced to tennis at 3, and I liked ice skating, but I was too tall. I tried that. I tried soccer, and I kept swimming and tennis. And then at 9, I played my first tournament, and I decided to choose tennis at 9. And I think, yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with your genetic background. If you're functional with your body, you can tell, like when you look at kids, like since I'm coaching kids, you can see who's functional and who isn't.
I
And
was not
that's
functional when
you
I was
weren't
a kid.
functional.
No.
You can see it, but you
Oh,
can
thanks.
also no, not with you. With other kids you can see.
Yeah.
But you can also build an athlete, but to build an elite athlete, you do need a body that can be, athletic. I mean, if you look at a lot of the female tennis players, a lot of them are skilled athletes or skilled tennis players, but could you put them in another sport? Maybe 20% you could put in another sport. Men's side, maybe like 30% you could put in another sport, maybe maybe a little more. But yeah, I think if I had picked swimming or track and field, I could have done any of those.
Well,
And
you
that's
clearly ended up in the right sport, and
I
and you
did.
and you really hit the ground running too. I mean, I vividly remember that summer of 1999 at Wimbledon, and full disclosure, you and I are the same age, so it was nice for me to see someone of my age at the time who was having
Yeah.
this deep run. And I'm just thinking, we've seen so many young players, even in recent years, have big runs early.
Mm-hmm.
Even here in Canada, Bianca
Yep.
Andreescu in 2019, Leila Annie Fernandez more recently,
Yep.
but difficult to sustain it. And I'm just wondering, what are the pros and cons to having such a big result early in your career? You're
Yeah.
obviously in a great position to be able to speak to that, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, I think there's a lot of pros, but then I think the cons are it's not so much the playing, but this affects the play on the court. So the cons are the media, the environment you have to learn how to be in, and the opponents, and then all the what word would I use for it? It's like it's like all the jealousy you get. So it's interesting because it's when you have a run like that, look, and then everybody takes notice and it's fabulous. And then you have to back it up, but you're still young and you haven't learned how to be on tour. So even with Bianca and Layla, it's a bit different from me because I literally came from high school. I'd played a couple challengers, but I was in school full time, and then I was doing challengers on my breaks. But even for Bianca and Layla, because I played doubles with Bianca in Granby before
Is that
her
right?
big run. Yeah,
No way.
we
Wow.
got to the semis. I think we lost to Erin Rutliff and
Oh,
her partner.
she was our
So it
guest.
was
She was our guest last week on the pod,
yeah, and
Yeah.
she
actually.
just
Grand
won the
Slam
U.S.
champ.
Open. Yep,
Yeah.
Grand Slam champion. So I think the hard part is okay, then how do you handle the attention with the media and going into a press conference and then just getting bombarded with questions if you lose? How do you handle that? And look, we've seen it with Naomi Osaka too, and she's won more than one Grand Slam. And then how do you handle the jealousy of the other players and the coaches and just anybody around you? How do you handle that energy? And then how do you set up your season so that you don't get distracted from all the outside stuff? And then you have to add in social media for the ones now. I didn't have that luckily, but I did have newspapers and you just don't read them. And then how do you handle all that and take it on court and be competitive against players that want to crush you like every time
Right.
and find your game? So I think that's what people don't have empathy for, because if you haven't gone through it, it's hard to understand it.
Yeah. And I think good point that today with all the social media, like, oh my goodness,
It
just another
magnifies
layer
it. I mean,
to
look
deal
what
with.
Coco Gauff said in her speech. I almost fell off my chair.
I couldn't believe it either. Yeah.
I was like, wait, everybody loves you.
Yeah, who's hating on Coco Gauff,
Yeah, like
honestly?
who's hating on you? But see, I stay off social media, so I don't know, but obviously she was getting people that were hating her
Yeah,
and she
yeah.
felt it. So, and
That,
it in the ESPN realm, everybody loves her. So I was going, "Whoa, this is like totally off book."
yeah, my jaw dropped too when I heard her say that. So you just never know what players are dealing
You
with,
don't know.
Um, you persevered though, you stuck with it. And as you mentioned earlier, like even into your late 30s, you were still going. And Ben and I remember
Yeah.
seeing you here in Toronto at the Tevlin Challenger, just I feel like a few years ago. And
Yeah.
I heard someone speaking about you, and I'm like, no, she's not here. Come on, really? And then I saw you, and I'm like, oh my goodness, amazing. Um,
Yeah. Look, I didn't want to walk away and give up because I don't give up in anything I do. That's like a big thing for me. It's really hard to just give up. Like, even if I'm practicing serves with one of my kids and I miss one, like, I have to make, like, I don't really miss a lot with them, but I just don't give up. It's a good quality, but it's also it's a hard quality, and I know athletes will understand this, especially professional, when like you don't have another option and you have to walk away. It's just like heart-wrenching, but it's a good quality to have that you don't give up because it helps you in life.
well said.
No, that's very well said. Just speaking of the women's game today, and we talked about it a little, are beyond Coco Gauff, I mean, we touched on her. Are there any
Mhm.
other players maybe you particularly really like to watch play and certain ones that are really standing out to you?
Yeah, well, I like watching Mahova
Hmm.
because I feel like she has an all-court game. She has very good technique, but there's a spark that's missing. And I don't know what it is. I don't know. It's maybe the intensity. It's just not there. And I feel like if she turns that on, she could be winning Grand Slams because I really like her game a lot. And I don't know what it is mentally. It's just, she just doesn't have that like grit. The
Killer
grit.
instinct.
Yeah, where you
Hmm.
just want to crush it. And I learned how to get that better. I was a little too nice in the beginning, and I wish I was a little more tough. But then I had to go through a lot to get tougher. But I understand that it's hard. If you're a nice person, it's hard to have the grit and to turn it on and want to crush somebody. So I'd like to see her do that. I actually like watching Peyton Stearns at the US Open. I did one of her matches. I liked her game for an American player. She's not big, and I don't think she's going to win Grand Slams, but she is mentally tough, and she's been through college. So college makes you tough. Those college matches, I mean, there's some rough matches out there. So I did like her, and I liked her grit, and I think she could be a fun person to watch. And then let me think who else. I mean, I always liked watching Ash Barty, so maybe she'll come back.
Nothing would surprise me. You know,
Yeah, look, she
yeah,
had a baby, so I think she had a baby, right? And
Hmm.
she
yeah,
popped out a baby. They're all popping out babies and coming back.
and doing well too, right?
Yeah. So I would like her to come back. I think women's tennis needs more excitement. And the fact that Coco Gauff won the US Open is going to help women's tennis, but they need more players to make a rivalry. And my generation had that with Venus Serena and then Clijsters Henin, and then you had Lindsay Davenport. She's a little older than us, but we had that excitement. We had Anna Kournikova. I mean, you just go down the list: Conchita Martinez, Amanda Kutzer, Mary Pierce, like that, from the age range of like 5 years older than me to like 3 years younger, and maybe 7 years older. Capriati and Monica Seles, and you just had all these fantastic names that brought excitement to the game. And I feel like there's a shift in women's tennis where we need some of that. And I don't know if we're going to get it, but I hope we will. Now on the men's side, we're getting it. We have
Yeah.
more characters and we have more excitement, and then now we have all the young Americans. And then you have, let's hope Felix Auger Aliassime like pulls his game together again. So,
We're
because
we're
he's
all
fun to
hoping up
watch.
here. That's
I
right.
really like his game, actually. I like watching him a lot. I'm a big fan of him. I like Ben Shelton. Rod
Well,
Laver
those
loves Ben Shelton too.
Okay,
exactly.
insert Laver Cup question here.
Right. Well, I mean, I should follow up. It was a good showcase, I think, for Canadian fans to have the Laver Cup this year in Vancouver.
Hmm.
And, I saw kind of a lot of complaints going into this event because, okay, Novak's not there,
Yeah.
Nadal's hurt, Federer's retired, he's there, he's not playing. Do you think maybe there has to be kind of that wave of acceptance of like we're ushering in this new generation. These
Hmm.
are going to be the faces,
Yeah.
and we have to kind of embrace their games because I honestly thought a lot of the tennis was pretty great.
Yeah, I did too. And yeah, I think Wimbledon and US Open this year showed that there's more to now Roger and Rafa and Andy Murray. I mean, Andy Murray's still playing and he's still exciting to watch, but there's more to men's tennis to watch than those three. And there's now a handful of guys that are exciting, maybe even more than a handful. Maybe there's six guys that could win Grand Slams right now, even though Novak is just dominating.
Mhm.
But if on any given day, look, Medvedev, you have him, you've got Alcaraz, obviously, you've got Novak, you have, I could even throw in, who did I like? Oh, well, Rublev, even though he hasn't gone past the quarters. I mean, the guy's gone to how many quarterfinals?
Not nine of them now.
Yeah, that's impressive. So you've got, I could go down. I mean, Ben Shelton, he's not ready to win a Grand Slam, but who knows? Maybe the draw opens up and he could do it. So Francis Tiafoe. So I feel like this US Open was important for the tennis world again to see on the men's side that there are a lot of new characters and they're exciting and they have personality, and I feel like Alcaraz is leading the charge, obviously, and he's really invigorated the men's game after people like being upset that Roger and Rafa are not playing.
Yeah, absolutely. We're heading into overtime almost here on our chat because my
Yep.
Zoom says it's going to implode in 4 minutes. But I'll give you one to end on here, and that's
Okay.
speaking about the Laver Cup that was here in Canada for the first time.
Mhm.
What do you take of this event? Is it an exhibition? Is it really competitive? I mean, the 13-2 overall scoreline for Team World didn't really lend itself to a big finish. It kind of ended with a whimper with just the one doubles match on Sunday. Like I would have been ticked if I had bought tickets for the final day,
Yeah, and you got
unfortunately.
that match.
Right. So yeah,
I
what's
don't
your
know.
overall?
There's so many cups going on now. I feel like it's still an exhibition look. It's not a tournament. They're getting paid though, but they want to win because it is a team event and they made it competitive. But really, is it 100% competitive? I don't know. I haven't played it because they don't have women,
They
but
should.
they should have
They
women.
should.
I don't know. I feel like Europe needs to step it up, obviously, but before that, the world was couldn't even win
True.
any. So
Yeah.
maybe it's just flip flopping, and they have to find their way and the balance, and it'll get there. I mean, you've got Roger Federer and his agent Tony Godsick running it, so we know it's going to be successful. It just is it going to be successful in America, and it's going to be tough if they keep holding it now during football season. But in
Yeah.
Europe, I
Tough
think it's more
competition.
popular. It's tough competition on North American side, I feel, because it's like college and NFL all at once. But yeah, I think all those cups are still kind of exhibition-y, but they're competitive because you have something on the line at the end of the day.
I personally think they should have had Federer come off the bench to help Team Europe have a little spark there. I mean, it couldn't have
Right?
Yeah,
hurt,
like put
right?
him in doubles, right?
Couldn't have hurt.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, that would have been fun.
Well, look, Alexandra, thank you so much for your first appearance, and I'd like to say first of hopefully many moving forward. We really enjoyed having you on, and and
Thank you
and Ben will say a
guys.
few words too. But thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. It was great to hear the insights of an athlete as well. I feel like anytime you're maybe broadcasting a match, it sounds like you want to get down there and hit the ball yourself. So that's really cool to hear.
Thanks. Well, I got great advice from a fabulous guy who's now on NFL football, Tom. And he told me you act like you're playing the match for the viewer. and you
That's
get
cool.
immersed and you pay attention to the match and then you present what you feel like is going on.
I love that.
Tom Rinaldi told me that.
There you go.
Perfect, Tom Rinaldi. Thank
Yep.
you so much for joining us, and we'll chat to you another time.
Thanks, guys.